Well, welcome everybody, and it's terrific to have got the tone right already with a very male-oriented car show at the top of this session. I'm delighted to welcome Kim Shillinglaw to her first controller session, I think, at Edinburgh, and to all of you for coming, so thank you. There's a couple of bits of housekeeping I should do. We're almost certainly not going to stop at the end for questions. That is because technology has landed at Edinburgh, and as you may know by now, there's an app, and I've honestly no idea how you use it, maybe, but anyway, as in what the hashtag is or anything, but you probably do. So if you want to ask any questions, it's very North Korea, completely anonymous, and you can ask any questions you want, and I will attempt to relay those to Kim, only, frankly, the interesting ones. Let's see how we do. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is there are drinks afterwards where you can mix with Kim and her team, I think, which are upstairs at something called the BT Lounge. So that's upstairs after this. And the final thing to say before we start is that I know you'll all have been to many controller sessions this Edinburgh and over the years. I know it's a concern when the interviewer is someone ultimately who's a producer who relies on the broadcaster for their living. That may concern you, that I'll pull my punches and not ask the big questions, but may I assure you, I will be relentless in my pursuit of what Kim is up to. I'll be asking her whether she wants to ask or not, what her favourite colour is. I'm not going to shy away from that. I can get it from Freedom of Information anyway. I'll be asking her why she is just so good at what she does. I will not, I will not shirk on your behalf. So, Kim, welcome to Edinburgh. I thought we'd start perhaps with an existentialist crisis, if I could, which is that we know, and let's not go into the whys and wherefores, we appear to know that a few months back, at the height of the government and the BBC talking about the licence fee and so on, that at one point the Director General said, if this carries on like this, you won't have a BBC2. He suggested that there wouldn't be a BBC2, and so we don't need to go over whether that's right or wrong, but I suppose it just leads into the question, which is, what for you would a world be like without BBC2, or put it the other way around, what is the purpose of BBC2 and what is the gap that it fills?
Start with the easy
stuff. Let's do that.
I think that was a genuinely scary moment. I mean, we all know the sort of situation between, you know, the government and the BBC at the moment, and I don't think this is a sort of forum to sort of talk about that, but without a doubt, for me, you know, both as controller of BBC2 and 4, but also just as a viewer, it felt like a really scary idea, a television landscape without BBC2. You know, it is genuinely and always has been my favourite channel. I think a world without, you know, The Honourable Woman, W1A, Charlie Brooker, Wolf Hall, the Detectives, Spring Watch, you know, University Challenge, Only Connect, that feels like a much more arid cultural landscape, genuinely. And I can say that, I feel, because none of those, you know, very few of those shows that I've mentioned are ones that I commissioned. It's sort of testament to my predecessors. But the place that BBC2 occupies as a forum for really talented people to do some of their best work, and for, you know, curious, lively viewers to find stimulation, entertainment, and information. I would be, for one, really, really distressed for that not to be part of our cultural landscape.
And how do you think about how BBC2 sits? And we're going to come on, mostly we'll talk about the programmes and what's coming up and so, but how do you think about it, and how should producers think about it? Is where does it sit with Channel 4, BBC 4? I mean, just what is the sort, what is BBC2 for? What is it kind of?
I think it's for people who are curious, who are lively, who are confident enough not to see a contradiction between entertainment and intelligence. It's a channel that is quite, I think, very unique in the British television landscape, because it's and this is something that talent tell me, it's big enough to really be worth working for. It's not sort of Sky Arts or Sky Atlantic. It's the nation's third largest television channel. So it's big enough to be worth coming to do work that takes you, you know, 2 years to make, but it's not so big that share has to be its sort of dominant imperative. And that's a very, very special combination, that whether it's in factual or comedy or drama, I think I really value, and talent tells me that they value.
Don't listen to talent.
So that's where I'm going wrong.
So a year in, and arguably a year is enough time to make an impact, right? I guess, or you tell us. But what is the Kim impact? Right? What is BBC2 now? What work have you done? How have you shaped it? And you look and think, this is what I've...
I think you'll really start to see it coming through in the autumn schedules. Channels are, they're big oil tankers. They take a little while to sort of to move in any direction. I think the thing about, and I don't know if people are always honest about this. The thing about running a channel is that there's a great deal of continuity. I mean, BBC2's got an incredible heritage, whether it's in factual or comedy or drama, and part of my job is to sort of keep that going. Alongside that, I think that there are things that people are already starting to see coming through in the channel and will gather pace as well over time, which is, for all of that brilliance, I think there are ways that BBC2 could be a little bit more contemporary. You can have too much bunting. I think it's really important that we shine a light on, difficult subjects, challenging subjects. I think it's really important that BBC2 makes you laugh. I think it's really important that it entertains you alongside, provoking you to think. So there's a set of ways in which, I think BBC2 becoming a little bit more part of the national conversation, a little bit more contemporary is a real objective of us. And I think hopefully people can already see that coming through in some of the shows, certainly in the channel sort of presentation, its idents, those have all got, livelier, the way in which we're trying to stabilise the schedule, bring a bit more continuity to the schedule. So those changes will sort of gather pace, and really I think the shows on air in the autumn, which we'll see some of in this in this session, will give people a stronger flavour of the direction of travel as well as the continuity in BBC2.
But can we just pause on that point about, you've said before, that there's more to life than bunting or something, which is almost a life philosophy, I think, in many ways. But if you think about that and think about your point about it being more contemporary, or you've even said that BBC2, I think you said, needs to show its knickers at some point. So
nothing wrong with knickers.
Nothing wrong with that at all, though it's quite early on a Friday.
Wait till you see some of the clips.
How do you think about doing that, which is to say, give it that contemporary edge?
Yeah.
And let's take an example. The Channel 4 and Benefit Street and so on, that kind of slightly, more contemporary and in some sense, sort of somewhat shocking and controversial. I mean, can BBC2 be in that area? Can you get...
Channel 4 is a great channel, and it's here to do, I think, sort of quite different things from BBC2. BBC2 is very definitely a channel for grown-ups. I'm unambiguous about that. It is a channel for grown-ups that I think are quite young at heart, that are curious, are lively, and I think it's our job to sometimes bring difficult subjects to the mix in BBC2. But it is also a channel that wants to, give you an opportunity to sit back and to laugh and to feel good about the world. None of those things go away. It's about the mix that we want to put in front of people.
Okay, so let's talk about a show that I think there's 2 or 3 clips we're going to see over the course of the next 2.5 hours as we sit here, and the first one you've put together something you've been asked to put something together which you think is distinctive. I think was that channel defining,
right?
And you've chosen perhaps
the detectives.
So perhaps you just want to.
So this was a series made by a really talented team: James Newton, Colin, Rupert. Ruth. A large team of people who worked very hard to gain access to a new unit that the Greater Manchester Police had set up to investigate sex crimes, and in particular historic sex crimes, which are really, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, incredibly difficult to prosecute. You're working without CCTV, you're working, with sort of witnesses who, the fallibility of human memory, etc. And it was a really beautiful series. It was not just tackling a really important issue, as we all know, but it did it in a way that brought real innovation to the screen. It was, the look, the feel, and the pace of the series were really, really distinctive. And it was something that, when we looked at it, we thought, okay, it's a tough subject matter, brilliantly executed. How can we get people to notice this series? And so we decided to strip it over 3 nights, which I don't think we'd done before with a documentary of this ilk. And we felt quite nervous about it, actually. Shall we see a clip and then we can talk about it a bit more?
I think we can see a clip of the detectives, which I think will magically appear.
So for those who didn't see the series, that's a sequence in which the police are uncovering a wall of names, and it's a sort of crucial part of the evidence that goes on to help in the case against Ray Terrett, the former DJ. And the thing I love about it is that, you know, it's a peak moment in the investigation, but it's not played as a sort of dramatic revelation. It sort of unfolds quite right. Gently. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about, and very distinctive things, as you know, a lot of television speeds up and becomes more frenetic. This team had the confidence to really play the pace, you know, sort of quite slowly. And I think that's something that BBC2 can do from time to time in a very special way. If you think of something like The Honourable Woman in drama, again, that had a very considered pace. But I think the important thing to us is that there's a lot of content in that slowness. You know, it forces you to look at the screen and to pay attention, because it sits against a lot of other sort of very frenetic TV. Right. Really pulls your eye towards what's going on screen.
And do you want people to think about, because you've talked about that innovation, and do you want people to think about sort of, if you like, new ways, different ways of filming, of bringing the content to the screen? Do you think about the sort of fixed rig area, which, okay, maybe that story is done and is looking for a next iteration, but is that what you want people to think about?
I'm really interested in innovation, and I think it's really important to think about why we want innovation on BBC2. You know, it's something that we all claim to be looking for, but I think that when we have a passionate interest in, and a commitment to, and a remit to look at quite tough subjects on BBC2, it's all the more important to think incredibly carefully about how are we going to bring the audience's attention to those subjects. You know, we often think about innovation in things like formats or other areas of television. I think it's just as important, if not more important, when you're trying to engage the audience's attention in quite challenging subject matter. And that's what, you know, was so lovely about the very talented team who worked on The Detectives, that they did that. And it's not just it's not just, I mean, we've talked in the past about, for instance, James's use of prime lenses and the look that gave that series. But it was so driven through so many aspects of the series. So the use of sound and music on that series is really remarkable. You know, when they use natural sound, and when they just take the natural sound off, and all the time in every sequence, I think they were, and this was a very interesting conversation we had, all the time they were thinking about how can we shift one element in this sequence such that we make the audience pay attention, we make them look, we make them listen. And that commitment to bringing the audience to the subject matter that we want to do on BBC2, that's something that I feel really passionate about having that conversation with talent about.
And that said, you know, BBC has always had a track record of what we might call access docs, right? Which is telling stories which may not have that kind of multi-layering, right? Because the Claridges being one of it, but there are many other examples. Again, you're still in that area. You're still in, I know you have this Obama, I don't know if you've announced, have you? Yes, have I just announced? No, we're okay. Yeah. So you have access to the White House. Yeah, amazing. But which is obviously going to be an extraordinary, but how do you feel about that area? And
It's not that classic, you know, can't be important, but it is about thinking. You know, Norma brings such a very particular intelligence and questioning to, you know, the skill of the interviewing is one of the sort of incredibly distinctive things about anything that Norma does. So what you don't want to end up in is where, you know, by definition, innovation can't be the same in every series. It has to be different. So there's no one size fits all. And, you know, certainly don't want, you know, a million series that use prime lenses in the way that The Detectives did. You know, each piece has to be bespoke, you know. And of course, there's always a place for the more classic approach. But if we don't keep searching, particularly around the most difficult subject matter, for ways in which to make the audience feel, gosh, that's catching my eye, or gosh, that's catching my ear, then I think we're failing.
And you've talked about scheduling, just at the final point of Detectives, as an important part of what helped that, made that feel special. And we're going to come on in a moment to an entertainment piece, which was scheduled and stripped. Is that, again, you want to play around with the scheduling, with the sort of architecture of it?
It's one of the things that I thought when I tipped up at BBC2 is that, you know, it's both the beauty and also the challenge of BBC2, that it's got an incredibly it's quite a bitty schedule, and on the one hand that gives you sort of great variety. On the other hand, it can be sort of slightly confusing channel, I think, sort of to encounter. And that mix of stability and surprise is something that we're driving to more. I think trying to give this audience a sense of destination around sort of different nights is something that we're really interested in. But the lovely thing about the detectives and thinking about you know, the scheduling team's sort of thought around you know, trying to do it differently was that just nobody expected that from a sort of landmark documentary. Do you know what I mean? And that brought people to it, and the audiences went up across the 3 eps.
And you've talked a lot actually about you know, as I say, playing with the scheduling, the architecture, making it more contemporary. Do you recognise in some sense that perhaps one of the accusations one could level at BBC2 is it's, you know, a little bit middle class, a bit stuffy, a bit staid, right? You know, quite heavy reliance on maybe Oxbridge presenters and so. I mean, is that something you recognise and think about? Is that?
I think, you know, I think you can easily pick out bits, because it's such a varied channel, you can pick out examples of sort of programmes and make a case for sort of lots of different things. I don't think that a channel that's got Charlie Brooker on it, for instance, or Mock the Week, or The Detectives, or sort of some of the other things that could be accused of being sort of stayed across the piece. But I do think it's important that we move with our audience. And I've said before that, you know, if you're 60, you grew up with punk. You know, it's not the case that sort of people of a certain age are, you know, old in mentality and mindset in the traditional way we thought of that before. So I do think it's important that BBC2 keeps moving, that it is contemporary, that it is lively. It never lets go of being a grown-up channel. It never lets go of its commitment to content or questions, but that it is keeping pace with the way, you know, the way we're all you know, moving on.
I don't really remember punk. So we're going to move on
you
to...
in your bedroom reading, weren't you?
Move on to another VT in a second, but first we have an exciting question from the app, okay, which moves us on to an area that I think is clearly of great interest. So the question goes, you've lost Top Gear and Bake Off, which I hope is not news to you. I think you knew. What a way to find out. Can you cope with them, and how? And that's from D. Cohen, who no, that is an anonymous question, but it's clearly a very, you know, let's go into that area a second. So we'll put Top Gear to one side. Let's talk about generally first. You know, BBC incredible track record at launching these huge, you know, factual entertainment. You know, the Bake Offs, you know, The Apprentice back in the day, Dragon's Den, and so on and so forth. There is there not, a sort of, it's not really just a BBC2 issue, this, right? There is an issue about those competition formats, where they go next, right? And that's a problem for you.
Yeah, it's you know, the whole space of factual entertainment is, you know, it's probably one of the most competitive spaces in television, isn't it, in the UK and internationally. And you're right, BBC2 has got an incredible track record of sort of spotting things or sort of finding things, or and grow. You know, most of the shows that you mentioned they weren't launched as huge shows. They were grown on BBC2, and it's something that I think anybody who's involved in BBC2, you know, today or historically, should be incredibly proud of that track record of doing that. And obviously we hope to keep doing that, you know, sort of as we go on. It isn't easy, but I think the reason why BBC2's got such a great track record, and I hope we will, you know, over time find more of those shows, is that all of those shows that you've described are rooted in factual. You know, BBC2 always starts with, you know, what is the factual territory, whether that's, you know, obviously baking as sort of my predecessor sort of spotted, or sewing, or, you know, dragons with sort of entrepreneurship. There's something real world that's a starting point for all those shows. And then the channel is incredibly good at sort of building out from that to think, okay, how can we make this more entertaining? How can we sort of drive, you know, that sort of competitive element or a live element into it? And I think that's in our DNA as a channel.
And let's just touch on Top Gear. Let's say from the outside, the dust has settled. You're committed to a new series, a new host, and so on. But just as you sit back, it's your biggest show, and you look back and you think, wow. So we have this extraordinary show. The presenter left. The presenters left. And I suppose my question is, do you sit back and think, could we have done that differently? Is there anything the BBC can learn about talent? Talent can be very, very difficult. Or do you think, look, it was all, frankly, it's all Jeremy, it was all his behaviour, he has to take the consequences. The BBC can look at itself and say we handled it exactly the right way. How do you think about that?
For me, I mean, I think it was a very sad episode in lots of ways. And for me, the biggest reminder is that, for all this is telly, for all this is, this is business, for all this is a sort of competitive industry, at the end of the day, it's about human beings. And I think it was just a very, very human situation. I'm, and always will be, fond of Jeremy and James and Richard, great respect for their craft skills, and I think it was just very, very sad, the way in which, very, very, human frailties that I think you have to, just as a sort of person, be respectful and understanding of, became part of the story. But you get to a point where what happened, everybody knows what happened. It wasn't something that, as the BBC, was acceptable. I don't think any organisation would have found it acceptable. And for me, the biggest story is that sometimes human beings are bigger than telly, the imperatives of telly.
And the new series, in a word, because we'll move on. Excited, yes. Frightened, equal measure?
So excited, of course, terrified. I really can't think of a person that better combines two things that I think are really central to Top Gear, no matter sort of, what era it's in. And one is, an absolute passion, a genuine passion for cars. And that's so important to Top Gear. It isn't just an entertainment programme, although that's essential. It is actually about something, and that sits at the centre of it. Without that, you haven't got a show. But also incredibly spontaneous, incredibly surprising. That really remarkable quality that a handful of presenters, have, which is you don't quite know what's going to happen next. And watching someone who has that, that thing of you don't quite know what they're going to do next is always fantastic telly. So really excited about that. It's going to be different. There will be, there'll be continuity, but it will be really different. I think you'll see, Dunsfold looking quite interesting. The presenter lineup's going to be a bit different. So there will be some changes to the show. And it's scary, but it's really exciting.
That's one of the bolder pledges we've had, that you're going to make Dunsfold interesting at the end of the show. That's quite something.
Obviously not a Top Gear fan.
Brilliant. Well, look, there's so much to cover, so I think we'll keep going, and we want to look ahead in a second. But the other clip you've chosen, you've been asked to choose something which I think the phrase was something, what was I thinking of? That was the question, what was I thinking?
Okay, yes,
right?
There's a bit of that.
Now, this I notice comes from the wonderful people at Zeppotron, which is part of the Endemol Shine group, so I'm assuming you think this was a great thing to have done. And,
actually, I was going to talk about it as, a risk that didn't pay off.
There you go. Yeah, whatever you want. You paid us, so it's fine. Say a little bit about this clip.
So this is a show called Let's Play Darts for Comic Relief. It was an idea that sort of, it came in as sort of, it came in as sort of an idea for sort of Comic Relief, and I immediately liked the idea of it. It did make me feel a little bit nervous. I mean, darts is a really, it's part of BBC2's heritage, isn't it? The question of whether we could sort of achieve a show that both, satisfied the darts audience and also, brought in a new audience, that did feel like it might have ended up as quite an uneasy compromise where you sort of fell between two stools. I think the team did an incredible job. He didn't pay me to say that. And they were also really responsive to the way in which we asked them to design the show so that we could sort of strip it over a week. But maybe let's have a look at it and then we can talk a bit more about it. I partly chose it because it's very different from the detectives. It's sort of those two things together really, I think, sort of illustrate the range of BBC2. But the other thing that it does is sort of it's sort of an example of how smart entertainment is really important to us, particularly at 10 o'clock. And we worried about lots of aspects of it. You know, would the comedians, would they have the skill level? We wanted the team at Zeppotron to take the competition really seriously. So the dart, when you're in one of the darts matches, you know, we decided to have very little commentary, for instance. We had Gabby because she's got a sports background, and that was as important as bringing in the comedy with people like, you know, Richard Osmond and Lee Mack and others.
So a place for entertainment, or smart, you call it, I think you use a very smart entertainment, right, on the channel, and you're certainly looking for more along those lines in that genre. There are other, you know, I'm conscious we should talk about drama, we should talk about specialist factual and so on. I think probably what the best way to do it is I wouldn't mind going straight to the next clip, right, which is about what's coming up.
Okay, yeah, and then we can unpack
what's
it.
coming up, you've got some interesting, you know, pieces coming up which span some of a range of the genres.
Yeah.
So why don't we dip into that, and then, or I don't know, do you want to intro it first and give people a flavour?
Shall I just briefly say what the titles are? So there's a drama called London Spy, which we have coming up this autumn, which I think is a stunning piece. Love to talk to you a bit more about that. There are two comedies that we're going to show you a clip of. One from Cradle to Grave, which is based on Danny Baker's autobiography, and it's about Danny growing up in the 70s. And this is a clip where he goes off to see a performance of Hair, the musical, which was really defining in the 70s, obviously. There's a clip from Stag, which is a new comedy drama that we've got coming up from the team behind Wrong Mans, which I'm really excited about. And there's a clip from Gareth Malone's new series, Naked Choir, which is a little bit of departure for Gareth. So those are the four clips that we're going to show you. And then I'd love to talk a bit more about them.
Let's unpack those as we say. So we'll see that. Thank you. Thank you. There. If you enjoyed it, you are allowed to clap. It's up to you. But it's that's some fun stuff. So I think, given the constraints of time in controller sessions, let's, rather than go through each one, use them as to illustrate any number of themes. Let's start. Just think about drama.
Yeah.
And London Spy, however you want to play it. How do you think about drama on BBC2? You've had a purple patch, right?
Yeah.
Peaky Blinders, The Fall, Wolf Hall.
Yeah.
On one level, those great pieces, you could almost think in one guise as they could be quite reputational pieces for BBC One, right? In a way. So how do you think about what is a BBC2 drama, and maybe London Spy is an example of that?
You know, I think BBC2 drama is astonishing, and again, I feel I can say that because where Ben and Janice got it to, you know, was nothing to do with me. I think it's really important to the drama community. I think it's unique, it's distinctive. I think that, you know, the majority of BBC drama couldn't sit on any other channel. It's really one of the things that defines it, I think, is the absolute commitment to allowing people to do things that they really want to do, signature pieces. Tom Rob Smith, who wrote London Spy, sent me a lovely email the other day saying, you know, I found working with BBC2 as liberating as novel writing, and we know how individual novel writing is, and I thought that was just such an amazing thing for him to say, and a real tribute to, you know, people like Polly Hill in terms of BBC2 drama. I think the other thing that defines it is that and it goes back to that sort of giving people a space to do their most signature work, is when you look at BBC2 drama, how many of our pieces are produced by, you know, people who are, you know, writers and directors, sometimes even producers. So people like Hugo Blick or Jane Campion, people like, you know, sort of Peter Kosminski, and it's that ability to hold a complete vision. Jed Mercurio does it as well, you know, combining, you know, several roles. It's that ability to hold a complete vision of something very distinctive in their minds. I'm in awe of people who can do that. And the thing that I'm really committed to is giving people like that a space to do their very best work. London Spy is, it's a very BBC2 collision of two worlds. You know, it's the Secret Service, but it's also the world of clubbing and hedonism, Ben Wishaw's amazing, Charlotte Rampling's in it, Jim Broadbent gives an astonishing performance. And it has this sort of nightmarish quality, sort of seductive and yet nightmarish quality. It's as atmospheric a piece as something like Shadowline. And that sort of, that space that you can give atmosphere in drama is... on BBC2 is, I think, again, a real hallmark. We're not worried about driving the sort of storytelling as hard as maybe some other channels have to worry about.
And again, would you be thinking, when you talk about making it more contemporary, is that something you'd be thinking about drama, right?
It's principally in. I think actually BBC2 drama has been quite contemporary. I mean, obviously we've done period pieces like Wolf Hall and Banished, but again, I think what really distinguished those is Jimmy McGovern and Peter Kosminski, both great directors who've worked in many places. I think what was really special about what they did on BBC2 was that to bring directors like that, who are principally known for their work in contemporary drama, to period drama, such that both Wolf Hall and Banished, in very different ways, had a contemporary flavour as well. They felt quite modern as pieces, right, in different ways. I think that sort of clashing of talent, asking great talent like Peter or Jimmy to do something that they wouldn't do elsewhere, and give them a space to do that, is a very BBC2 thing.
And you've got Cradle to Grave and Stag, which look great, don't they? So moving into the more comedic, the comedy scripted.
Yeah.
Again, that's an area you feel you need to push in, and how do you want people to think about that?
Comedy is so important to BBC2. I mean, and I think, I say this very humbly, I think BBC2 is very important to the comedy community as well. And one of my ambitions, together with Shane, the brilliant Shane Allen, was to do two things really. One, to get more event pieces in comedy. We can't compete with the likes of sort of 24 episodes of Big Bang Theory, or sort of the way American comedy works. So we have to sort of concentrate, and we want to concentrate our resources on big special pieces like the ones you've seen here. The other thing that we're really keen to do is play more comedy in peak. The 10 o'clock comedy slot.
That was Danny, was it? Who was that?
Always butting in.
Yeah, amazing.
The 10 o'clock comedy slot is really important, and playing things like W1A or Inside Number 9, both of which I love, in that 10 o'clock slot is fantastic. But the idea of moving some comedy to 9 o'clock is really important. So this autumn we've got a comedy double bill on BBC2, which is something that we haven't done for quite a long time on the channel, which is Cradle to Grave, and a really gorgeous piece called Boy Meets Girl, which is our first transgender comedy. Real warmth and heart. I really urge you to sort of check it out. And that pairing of sort of two comedy half hours at 9 and 9:30 is, we'll have to see how it goes, but it's a sign of how much BBC2 cares about comedy and wants to sort of see it at the heart of what it does. And both of those pieces, really, really distinctive. Again, Jim Field-Smith, who is the guy behind Stag, writing and directing that piece. It's that singularity of vision that we were talking about a moment ago, right, in terms of drama. Really, really great to see that in comedy as well. And Cradle to Grave, I mean, how lucky are we to have that? Jeff Pope and Danny Baker writing together, really crafting, a piece that sort of tells a part of our national story, but through comedy rather than through factual, and brilliant visual jokes in Cradle to Grave as well as the
we saw one of them. It was, yeah.
Did you find that funny?
I found that frankly deeply offensive. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's what the BBC is for, ladies and gentlemen.
Pre-Watershed at 11 o'clock in the morning.
So look, we only a few minutes left, and there's a couple of questions on here. Well, there's actually one question which is literally, will you commission my show, in effect? So I'm not going to do that one.
Okay.
Because it's
is that from you?
It's not one of ours, so I'm not interested. Ask a couple of people, one asking about which commission in the end you feel has most potential, which is a bit of an unfair question. But I suppose what they mean is, in the end, when it all boils down, what are you most excited? What are you sitting there thinking I'm most excited about? And in a way, you've probably would you say you've covered that with those 4 clips?
I'm really excited about all those shows. I mean, if you're asking me which has most potential in terms of ratings, I have no idea. I mean, it's you know, predicting ratings is an impossible job, and not really BBC2's job either. But all of those are shows that, whether they succeed or fail with the audience, whether we, you know, bring them to the audience's attention as we hope to do, I can't tell you, but I'll be very, very proud of every single one of those shows when they go out.
Jay Hunt said yesterday, or the day before, that any controller is telling porkies if they say they don't look at the overnights every morning, obsess about them. Actually, to be fair, she didn't say obsess about them, but think about. Do you? I mean, are you sitting there thinking, actually, your share is, I think, down a bit, right, for the first quarter?
It's up this autumn, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think about that? Does that?
Yeah, of course. You know, I all through my own working life, I have wanted to, you know, it's that old I think it was Hugh Weldon phrase, you know, make the good popular and the popular good. You know, when I did Horrible Histories, when I did Stargazing Live, what I wanted to do was combine what I believed was content with something entertaining. And if people don't see your shows, it goes back to what we were talking about with the detectives and why we scheduled it as we did, is that I want people to notice brilliant programmes. I want people to be engaged with difficult subjects. I want people to love what we do and care about it and watch it. But I don't think BBC2 is here to make that the sort of primary or dominant imperative. And as I really mean it when I say every single one of those shows, I will be immensely proud of having supported, even if they don't rate.
So two more things. One is there's a question which says, what from another channel are you most jealous of? So is there a programme or a couple of programmes that you think, oh, that would be, you know, that they're doing that right, I wish I was doing that? Do you think of any examples of that?
It's not that I don't admire shows on other channels, but I definitely do. But I do think BBC2 is so unique that it's difficult to sort of look and actually think, sort of, I'd be envious of that. You know, if I would, you know, I love shows, I love Big Bang Theory, you know, it's a real favourite. If there was a way to have that for BBC2, would I say no? Probably not, you know, but I doubt I could afford it. I thought Humans was a great, you know, collaboration between AMC and Channel 4. But I don't broadly look around and think, that would sit, you know, beautifully on BBC2. But that's not about not admiring other people's work.
And finally, just if you were to think about a shopping list, and if you were to think of your sort of top, right now, your top three sort of wants, what you must, where you feel you haven't got enough ideas or the right ideas, what do you think of when you think about, let's think about three areas where you think, come on guys, this is where I need your help.
Okay. I mean, it isn't just three areas, obviously. It's a really significant shopping list and, you know, always looking for new stuff. But I would say we need, you know, I'd love, you know, more single documentaries with sort of really great talent attached to them. I think we've done really well with precincts and essays. I want more that has character and narrative, you know, and those things unpicked. I would like, I'd love another schedule builder like MasterChef The Professionals, you know, for the early part of the year. I always have a need for specialist factual with a sense of event and scale to it. We've just had Mumbai Railway, World's Busiest Railway on BBC2 as a strip, and it, you know, it was the highest factual launch episode for any factual piece across BBC2 and Channel 4 this year. That sense of scale in specialist factual is really important to me. So those would be three things, but it's a big shopping list. We're hungry for ideas. I think BBC2, you know, it commissions a lot of new stuff every year. Our runs aren't as long in factual as Channel 4. We don't have as many schedule builders as ITV and BBC One, obviously. So our hunger for new ideas is a new access and new talent is really considerable.
Over to you, ladies and gentlemen. The challenge is laid down.
Is there one more clip? I think
there is one more clip.
Do we have time?
It's now 1:45, and I think I'm being told I've got to wind up.
You just want to drink, don't you?
I'm happy to show the clip if we're not going to be thrown out. Let's show the. What is the clip?
So the clip is we were asked to bring along a taster or a clip of a taster.
No one's stopping us, so let's keep going.
This is a clip from the taster for a show called Chinese School, which we did quite recently on BBC2. So we'll just have a quick look at that, and I'll tell you why it was an important piece for us. So that was the taster that was brought to us by the Current Affairs Department and Current Affairs Commissioning Team, and we've been thinking for a while about education. I've got kids. I'm sure lots of people, you know, here have kids, and that sort of that issue of Britain slipping down the international rankings is you know, it's something that we need to think about and talk about as a nation. And this was just a really nice, accessible way of tapping that issue. The taster was incredibly useful in persuading us that that team could get the tone that we wanted. It was also really useful in that was shot on handheld cameras, and what the team discovered was that, you know, it just got in the way, and in fact in the end they ended up shooting it on a rig, but we never made an issue of the rig. It was sort of a purposeful use of rig rather than a sort of marketing device, if you see what I mean, for the show.
And obviously quite a lot of genres you can't do the taster tape and so, right, because they're live or drum. But generally speaking, in that factor, you like, do you, to see, I mean, is that how you like to work?
It's incredibly useful as a sort of way to focus the conversation that you want to have around, okay, are we going to do this as a sort of full-blown experiment, which is what we decided to do, rather than sort of, you know, just an observational documentary? Are we going to, you know, do we think we can get the tone right? What kind of tone do we want in this one? What's the balance between current affairs insight and sort of, you know, and entertainment or warmth? So having those conversations, it's incredibly useful to have a taster for. But the most important thing for us was that this was, you know, a really considered experiment that, you know, Bow Hunt School, you know, agreed to participate in, that tapped part of that national conversation that I think it's really important for BBC2 to tap. And not only, you know, did the audience come to it, but it got an incredible, it was sort of, you know, it trended at the top of Twitter. We got a lot of sort of press coverage for it. And it really felt like for a couple of weeks we had, you know, turbocharged the national conversation around what kind of education system do we want in Britain and what's important, and how do we care about our international standing in that respect. And that's really important to us as a channel. Well,
good, and that was well worth extending to watch, so thank you for that. And I think what we're doing is we're eating into time now. The reason I want to stop is because there's you can actually get together with Kim now in the BT room.
Why isn't it the BBC room?
Which apparently Sky and BT argued over who could sponsor the room, but BT won. And it's upstairs, I think. I'm looking for someone to contradict me. Upstairs, so please do join Kim and her team for drinks and discussion. I do want to give a huge thank you to Kim. Fantastic tour through the many varied bits of content on BBC2, so fantastic. Thank you, Kim. Many, many thanks.